members. We have Alicia Hayes, Gordon Lafer, Laurel O'Rourke, Maya Rabasa, Martina Shabram, and Mary Walston. And again, thank you for joining us. And believe it or not, we have 8 questions for you. And if we go through it, and we have 45 minutes. So they're really, hopefully they, just sort of pace yourself into that time frame. And I'm going to start off and I'll end it. And then we'll just rotate through the group to ask the other questions. So the first question, you ready? Is in your superintendent search process, which tasks would be carried out by district staff, by board members, and by you as consultants? We're trying to get an idea of time commitment for each one of those groups and responsibility. What's your experience?
Yeah. Okay, I'll start and see if Sylvia, Kathleen want to add to this. We really learned a lot during the Denver search that we completed, and we've done a number of other CEO searches with leadership teams. We're currently now working in Cincinnati Public Schools. And so there are a few things that are really important to us right now. And one is that we clarify the roles that the board plays, the district plays, and that ALMA plays. ALMA, we see our role as really leading the design of really advising as best as we can on stakeholder engagement and leading the design of each of those focus group meetings, community gatherings, whatever those are. We craft the questions, we do all of that work. We work with the board to create the job profile, to confirm the competencies, and then we really work with the board to design interview questions, but then we build the interview guides and all of the materials that go along with that. So we are really the content developers. The board they are very involved at really informing who are the best stakeholders for us to meet and gather with. They take the input from the community and make decisions, come to shared agreement about the competencies for the role. They actually brainstorm interview questions and scenarios based on real life situations that test out the skills needed for the role. And then they participate as interviewers in the process. They participate in training, anti-bias training, and as interviewers in the process. The staff in the district, there are a few different roles that we seek out. First, from the communications standpoint, we really request that the district communications team is able to help us ensure that the community is aware of any community gatherings or meetings that we're having, that there's no question, the word is out there, everybody knows what's occurring, and everybody knows how best to participate. We look to the communications team, or sometimes there's a group called Family and Community Engagement, or others that are working with the board and really understand community outreach. And so for us, it's important to reach out to members of the community who don't often show up at events or sometimes have been excluded from events. So really looking for district staff to help us plan with enough time to get the word out there and to use unique channels that are going to help us reach community members that are difficult to reach. We also work with district staff to communicate on the website or any other channels that the district wants to use to ensure a transparent process. At times we may, if we do virtual gatherings, we might have district staff help to arrange those gatherings, the Zoom links to help moderate. Those are some more minor tasks, but I think I've covered the main ones. I will add that board members sometimes have their own communications consultant. That's someone who's representing the board in the screening process from a communication standpoint, crisis management, crisis response. We think that kind of structure in partnership with district communications works really well. So that's something we would also recommend, but it's not always a given.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to Alicia.
Okay, how would you use an equity lens to plan for community engagement in the search process?
Thanks, Alicia. So the first piece is really being as clear as we can about who all the stakeholders are in the community, and really thinking about all the different groups of individuals, your parents and caregivers, your students, your teachers, your staff, your central office staff, the direct reports to the superintendent, but also community members, religious leaders, community partners who work with the district, sometimes funders and business leaders. You know, who are those individuals who really care a great deal about who this next leader will be? And we try to establish a structure for meeting with those groups in a way that is authentic and really allows people to share their voices. So in Cincinnati Public Schools, where we are right now leading a superintendent search, we carried out 3 community gatherings, one in each of the 3 regions of Cincinnati. And we held about 40 different meetings over the course of a site visit, where we were on site actually twice, but then also held virtually, where we met with members of the community. So we really worked in partnership to do that. I think the other thing that I would say about equity, which is really important to us, is that we also had a survey that went out to all members of the community as well. And that's something we would recommend in any superintendent search. I interrupted myself when I was about to say that the structure of those meetings for us is very important, that we're hearing from every voice that we can. So even if we have a community gathering where we want to get as many people together as possible, we will have our own facilitators, sometimes work with district to support, but we will break the group out into smaller groups so that they can have roundtable conversations. In this way, you don't have the one person who happened to get the mic that has to speak and everyone else listens. You actually get to have these engaged conversations with people. We also craft our questions very carefully. We want to create a safe space where people can share their stories. We tell people that their stories are, that we are only sharing themes and that we're not going to be attributing any comments to them. And then we ask questions that are not just tell us about what you think the superintendent's skills should be. They're things like, you know, think about the future that you see for your child, that you hope the district has prepared them for. Tell us what that looks like, and tell us what you hope the district is providing right now that is helping to prepare your child. We ask questions about the challenges and barriers that they have experienced personally, or whether they've witnessed others experience. And so we really want to hear from people on a personal level, and then connect those to the things they're hoping their superintendent will be able to do for them. Finally, it's worth noting, many people it's not always clear what the job of the superintendent is. Most people are dealing with their classroom teacher, they're dealing with their school, specifically their principal. So we try to explain first what the job actually is, how it supports all schools, but a lot of the conversations, in particular with community members and parents, will focus more on what they experience as parents in the school system. We do seek out translation services. I mentioned in our last interview, if the meeting is in Spanish, we're able to speak in Spanish, and we would work with you to find out what other significant populations there are and hopefully arrange for translators to be on site wherever possible.
Great. Maya.
Hi, and welcome back. Are there things that you've done in past searches that you learned from and would now do differently? And if so, why and what?
Did you say, are there mistakes? What was the word?
No, just are there things that you've done in past searches that you learned from? And if so, and would now do differently? And if so, why and what?
Yes. There are a couple of things that I would share. And one I started with, which was with Denver. When we started the search, we didn't have the clarity of roles of what different people in the district were doing to support the search. And, you know, it always seems like a lot of time before community gatherings or those meetings are starting, even if you give yourself a month or 6 weeks, that the communication has to start right away. And so having a real clear communication strategy as early as possible and making sure that's launching at least a month before any community meetings are occurring, that's a big lesson learned for us and something that we're really trying to do. Right now, we're in this hybrid place where we're doing meetings in person and virtually. So we're learning a whole new thing about what people prefer. A little harder to predict, where are people going to be there in person or are people going to be there virtually? So far, it seems like people, at least where we are still preferring virtual, but that's something that's evolving. So it's more like just something we are adapting to in the moment rather than a thing that we're learning. Sylvia, Kathleen, anything you would add there? I have one more, but go ahead.
The only thing I would add is that to some of your earlier questions, I think we do like to upfront get clear on the decision-making process. How will the decisions be made? What input will be factored in throughout the process? So as we engage other members beyond the board, how will we use their feedback in the deliberation and consensus building process? That would be something that, you know, we're continuing to make sure that we have conversations up front with board members so that we are able to make sure that we're getting the input in a timely fashion that can be used at the points where the board would like to have that input.
I would just add that we really were incredibly excited and inspired by the student input in the Denver search and also in the Cincinnati search so far. And so something that we learned from students in Denver is how to be clear, to Sylvia's point about how their input is going to be used and in what way they will be able to engage with candidates. So they were our teachers in that process, and we definitely learned from their organization around how they wanted to participate in the search, the ways that we could engage students moving forward. And Monica mentioned earlier, just our focus on equity of access to the process. And so student voice matters tremendously to us. And we think about the people who are often not invited to the table and not invited to participate in these processes. And so as a former principal and district leader, I'm thinking about people who are transportation experts, people who are nutrition experts, people who are facilities management experts. we really found such great value in inviting their presence and their voices into the process. And so that is something that we learned. We gathered so much information there, and just the, as Monica mentioned, the clarity of role and how the information would be used to form the interview experiences for candidates. That was something that was not only informative, but richly rewarding, and just a key engagement in the process in Denver and then currently in Cincinnati.
Thank you. And I would just add one thing that was so well said. Thank you, both of you. I would just add as well the need to really make sure everyone is in complete agreement about their criteria for the role up front at the start, that we're not introducing new criteria mid-search or at the end of the search. So that's something we focus on a great deal early on, and we continue to check on that as we go through the search process.
Hey, Mary. Unmute, please.
There we go. Sorry, I've gotten out of Zoom practice. Okay, for your firm, how does conducting a search for a superintendent differ from a search for other high-level district administration? In what concrete ways would your process differ?
Yeah, there are several ways. For one, it's a much more public process. Everything is done in the public eye. And there are so many stakeholders who care a great deal about this. And so really caring for the transparency of the process, communicating as best we can at every stage, what's happening, what decisions the board is making, how people can have a voice in the process, the community engagement piece. We always do some level of conversation with stakeholders with high-level executive roles, but at the superintendent stage, it's just a much deeper, richer process. That's really important. The finalist interview stage also tends to be a lot more involved. As Kathleen said, having students themselves interview candidates, having teachers have an opportunity to interview candidates. Some of these things are live streamed and they're public. Having the opportunity for public surveys where people give their feedback back to the board. These are things that are less likely with chief level roles in districts. So I think those would be the top differences. In terms of sourcing candidates, what I would say is, because it's a superintendent role, we see, and because it's so public, that candidates are very concerned about confidentiality, particularly because they're in high-level leadership roles in their own organizations, or they are sitting superintendents, and it would be very damaging if anyone knew that they were even considering a role, another superintendency. So we do find at the superintendent level that protecting the confidentiality of the candidates, important in every case, but requires special care at the superintendent level. One last thing is internal applicants. If there are internal high-level leaders who might be considered for the role, these are people who are known in the system, people some might advocate for. These are people who are valued in the district and want to be treated with respect. And again, that's also similar at high-level leadership, but has a more stakes at it at the superintendent level.
Thank you. Martina.
Okay. And I just say that I am dealing with an injury right now, and I realized that I have like winced a couple times, and that if I were in your shoes, I may be like, wow, what's this person's body language? And so I just wanted to say that any wincing is about what's happening in here, not out here. So, okay, I will ask my question now. What steps would you take to find a superintendent with a proven track record of successfully implementing an equity lens? And how would those steps be different from a standard search procedure?
Yeah, I'm wondering, Kathleen or Sylvia, either of you want to take this first? I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, I would, Monica, if I can just jump in, and you know exactly where I'm going with this, but Monica has mentioned the importance of the clarity of role description. And we care so deeply about taking stakeholder feedback into account as we're designing the job description for superintendent. And even though the role could be comparable across districts, and you know, there is a lot of talk about equity in general in our work right now, it is so unique to each district's context. And so we would want to take stakeholder feedback to design the competencies, to share them with the board and the search committee, to make sure that we were really defining in great detail what the board and the team is interested in terms of equity. And we have had we truly are honored to have such great experience in working with candidates and working with teams that have helped us to refine our equity lens, and making sure that as we're defining the role, candidates can see themselves reflected in the narrative of the role, and they are able to respond very specifically to the competencies as they're defined through the interview experience. And so I would say, just off the top, that's something that we care so deeply about, is getting really clear about the definition of role. And that involves a lot of stakeholder input. And that's something that we work with key leaders and other participants in the process from the very beginning. So I'll start there, Monica.
What I would add to this is, you know, after we get real clear on the job description and the competencies for the role, then we begin to design the entire selection process along the areas of competency that the board has agreed upon. So you will see that the interview questions at every stage will be based and rooted in the competencies. So if valuing equity and a proven track record of working with a view and a perspective on equity is identified in the competencies, then we will design our questions to reflect that, and so that we can glean from the candidates what they have done and what they have been able to achieve along that lens. We would also want to hear areas where they fell short and areas where they're still learning, so that we know where they are in their journey and how we can help prepare the board to support them in the work if they are selected for this role.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I would just add, in terms of the questions that we ask and the performance tasks that we have developed, you know, we're not just asking people to tell us what they believe. We are asking them to tell us what they've actually done and accomplished, whether that is around dismantling systems that have been structurally racist in the past or inequitable, whether it's been about distributing equitable resources or resources in a more equitable way across schools to meet student needs, whether it's about how they've led a team, you know, towards being able to name and engage in difficult conversations around equity. We don't just ask them questions, we look for evidence of it in their background, in their experiences. We might craft scenarios that don't have easy right or wrong answers, but really test at things. Makes it very difficult for people to fake, and gives a lot of data to the board, exactly where someone is on that journey around equity.
Laurel.
Sorry, I'm typing. Let me do 2 more words. Okay. Hi. How do you find, okay, this has a typo. How do you find, oh no, I have a typo in my head, I guess. How do you find candidates for positions? What networks or sources do you tap into? And how do you connect with them?
Sylvia, do you want to take this question?
Sure. So one of the things that we'll do in the early phase of the work is to develop our recruitment strategy and our outreach strategy. So that will include not only, you know, our normal website where we post all of our ALMA searches, but then very targeted job posting sites that could be, you know, sites for educators, it could be in the nonprofit space, it could be traditional sites like LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter, it could be affinity group sites. So we'll develop a list of first places where we would want to post the position. Then we'll also develop what we call our prospecting and connector list. And we will begin outreach to the folks in our network, people that we've worked with and for and have been connected through our many, many years of work in public education to begin to identify potential candidates for this position. And then we will start having those phone calls with folks that we think would be great candidates for the role and tell them about your district and tell them about the strengths and the opportunities and the challenges that they will potentially have the opportunity to lead the organization through in order to get them to apply. And so we'll do that up until the very last day, because we want to make sure that we are always sourcing for the role, because anything could happen as we get into spring recruiting season. So we want to make sure that we're keeping these conversations going and that we're continually looking for candidates who may be a great fit for this opportunity.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that in our searches, we really are looking for people who match the profile that we established with you all. So we're not, you know, there is a good level of research we do on similar sized districts or people who are perhaps high-level leadership roles in larger districts and might be ready for superintendency. So we do that kind of research, but when we're really having those conversations, we're actually matching up against what we've learned about your organization, your values, the skills required of the role, and those competencies. And so each of those networking conversations, we're trying to get closer and closer to the person that really matches that profile. And it's very customized in that way. And we pride ourselves on finding the person that is often unknown, but is actually ready for this role and a strong fit, and getting to the place where not only that, but ideally you've got several people, you know, at the finalist stage where you feel as a board, any one of them could be your next superintendent. So that's success for us.
Thank you.
Gordon.
Hi, good to see all of you again. Here's my question. Public input into a decision like this can sometimes be too scattershot to be useful, producing a wide range of comments from a large number of people who may not be representative of the community at large. How do you go about getting deep and meaningful input from the community at large or from specific parts of the community?
Yeah. So part of that is what we discussed earlier in terms of these, you know, deeper, you know, more intimate conversations with members of the community. You know, for us, it's really about giving you a balanced view, a balanced perspective, not just the people you hear from the most, right? But really, what are the common perspectives out there, and where are they similar and where are they divergent? No one place is going to be a monolith. We expect there to be a diversity of points of view. And yet there are often things that are common that do rise up to a level that there is demand for things to be addressed, for things to be different, things that people are looking for in their next leader. So we really work to communicate those things, and to communicate those things publicly, to come to a board meeting, even meet with the press, with the board, as I just did yesterday morning, to say, this is what we're learning. The good, the not so good, unfiltered. We're not here to be a filter for your community. We're here in some ways almost to be a microphone for the community, to say, this is what people care about. And where there are commonalities across different points of view. And then for the board, it's a facilitated conversation. It's the sense making that you make as the people who see all of it, to say, what are the things that we all hold true? Where is our common ground as a board? The things that we all agree we need to focus on. Sometimes there are ideological differences on the board, but you still have to decide a common set of competencies you're going to come around. And so, that's really the work there. I think the other part of the question for me, Gordon, is also, how do you set expectations for community about how their voices matter in the process? So we recently had a whole series of focus groups where our last question was, what will you need to see from Alma that will tell you that the time you spent with us today made a difference? Because people often feel their input is asked and nobody does anything with it. And people will tell you what they need, what they want to see, what they need to do, And so we feel accountable for that. And for us, it's important to be able to say, this is what we heard. And for the board to be able to say, this is what we considered, and this is what we decided. It might be different from some people's points of view, but you were heard and you were considered. That's one part of it. The other part of it is at the point of decision making. We want people to engage with candidates, but we know that ultimately the board has to carry the weight of the decision, and that has to be clear to everybody. So even if people are participating as interviewers, we're clear with them. We want your input. The board is considering your input, and they will take it into account along with every other experience they're having with these candidates to make their final decision. And then when that decision is made, to be able to come back and say, here's what we heard from the community about our chosen candidate. Here are the reasons we chose this candidate. So again, it's really a two-way street. I think I've answered a little more than what you were asking, but it's more than just how do you get that information, but also what you do with it and how you communicate back that really matters to us.
Thank you.
Gosh, we're on question 8 already. Pretty good. What's your process for doing reference checks on candidates?
Yes, several things that we do. This for us, this is one of those where we're in it with you. We do not want to be in a situation where a candidate that Alma put forward has some issue in their background that turns out to be an optic issue. So we do several things. Our team will do deep background checking. We will do all of the media, what's out there on the media, going back as far as the internet will take us. We obviously do references that the candidates will give us, but we ask specific questions in those references. And sometimes we'll do another level of reference checking where, again, are there other people outside of the references who can speak to the individuals? We ask candidates to give diverse references, not just supervisors, but maybe community members, maybe peers or direct reports to try to get a little more of a 360-degree view. And then Alma actually partners with communication firm or can partner with the communications firm, that's something we would recommend and consider to do, you know, a sort of deeper due diligence on the candidates. We do like to work with the HR department of the district, so that I would add that back to my question of expectations for the staff as well, to do their own due diligence. And all of this is usually happening somewhere between a semi-finalist or finalist stage before the finalist stage, especially if we're starting to, you know, connect with people outside of who the candidate has provided.
So is that something, the communications firm, is that someone you partner with that's part of your service?
Yes, that is something, that's someone that we partner with. We do often, we might often have your communications team, or if you have a communications consultant, do your own due diligence. I mean, it's sort of the more the merrier there, but we do take great care at that. And we do have an organization that partners with us as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, those are our questions. And we actually finished 7 minutes before our deadline. So I'm pretty impressed. So I guess with just a few extra minutes, do you have any questions for us at this point? I can tell you what the next steps are.
Yeah, we'd love to hear what the next steps are.
We will be meeting we have a board meeting tomorrow night. And so we're really grateful you guys could make tonight work, and we will be making a decision about which firm. We have 2 finalists, so we'll make a decision and be in touch.
Okay, that's awesome. Yes, I have so many questions, but I don't want to go over our time. I would love to just ask from the group, just as you all are beginning this process, what is one thing, and you don't all have to answer, just one or two of you, what's one thing you're especially wanting to make sure you get right with this search, with the way you carry out the search?
Anyone have a thought about that? Maya.
Community engagement, that part is really crucial. And the being transparent component of the community engagement, but the part where you talked, I mean, where the part that means the most to me is making sure we're hearing from folks that we don't typically hear from, not the same old voices.
I guess I'm going to just say one thing. I want to have a successful candidate. I want to get someone that will really work in our district and is what we're looking for and is happy here, and we're happy with them. Move us forward. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Laurel?
I'm really wanting to see that, first of all, we're a great place to work at. But also that the equity work that we're starting and the board is working hard on is, you know, I talk about foundational equity and how it's just really part of the system as opposed to performative equity. And I think we're starting that turn and that work, and it's really exciting. I know they've started it before I got here, but it's continuing. And having someone, like you said, and really is doing that work, is already doing that work and wants to be part of that.
We probably have time for one more comment if anyone's dying to weigh in on this. Then I'm going to say, oh, go ahead, Martina.
No, it's fine.
Oh no, we want to know.
I'll try to be, I'm never 1 minute of talking. I'm always more minutes of talking. I think I'm really hoping that students will feel fully able to participate, and that they'll feel like they are actually being listened to and not like propped up as, you know, just examples of young folks, but actually, you know, that we get to use their expertise because they are really smart about things that we don't know.
I love that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to meet with you all. We're all over the US. Sylvia and I, you can probably tell, are in hotel rooms on the East Coast, and Kathleen's on the West Coast. But we really appreciate, don't want to get you off your schedule, but just want to thank you for the time and the thoughtfulness. And we're happy to answer any other questions you have. So please feel free to reach out. You have my number. Anything else you need, don't hesitate to reach out. And we'll look forward to next steps.
Great. Thank you so much. And enjoy wherever you are in your time zones. The East Coast person had a later night, so thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay, guys, we have a little break till 6:55. So you might as well turn off your cameras and be back here at maybe at 6:54. Hi, Doug. Hi, Janet.
Hi, Judy. Oh, there's Janet.
Hello.
So is everyone here that's going to be here tonight?
Yes, you just have the two of us. Steve is working with another board. He is presenting candidates to another board tonight. He thought he might be able to get through it, but a lot of information for this board, and so he texted me and said, I'm not going to make it. And Gustavo is presenting in Chicago, or he may be on an airplane back right now. So it's Janet and I. Right. And we think we can make McPherson and Jacobson really well.
Thank you. No, I'm really glad. I just wanted to be sure we weren't leaving anyone out. So welcome. I'm Judy Newman. I'm board chair. And we have Alicia Hayes, Gordon Lafer, Laurel O'Rourke, Maya Rabasa, Martina Shabram, and Mary Walston. The whole board is here tonight. So we thank you for joining us again. And
thank you for inviting us back. We appreciate the opportunity.
Right.
Absolutely.
Figured we just had some more questions to ask, and actually there's 8 of them, and so we have 45 minutes, but it seems to be okay. But just so you know, so you can pace yourself. And so I'm going to start. We each have a question. I actually have 2. I have the first and the last, and then we'll go around the group. And so my first question is, in your superintendent search process, which tasks would be carried out by the district staff, which tasks by the board members, and which ones by you as the consultants? And approximately how does the hours of, get distributed for between those 3 groups?
I'm not sure we can be specific as to hours, but maybe a division of labor might be the best way to describe it. For the staff, and let's start with that, key to that is a person who is a point of contact, one person through whom all information flows from us to you during the search. Usually that's the administrative assistant who works directly with you, because that person has access to you, has access to all the resources within the district. And that person almost gets another full-time job during the search process. And the other key staff person throughout most of the process is your communications, person in charge of communications. And because it's critical that as we go through the stakeholder meetings, as we go through and get our survey out to the community, people are aware of those opportunities, and that we're able to have people be aware and to know what the process is. So those are the 2 key people on your staff. We will want to meet with central office staff, administrative staff, teaching staff, probably, and that can be broken out many different ways. Maybe just the union leadership, the rep council for the union. Want to make sure we meet with the classified staff representatives. Again, it could be the leadership of the union, their representative council, but those are important. And then we'll want to be working to meet with students. And so probably building level administrators that we're going to need to spend some for some of their time to arrange those meetings with different student groups. Usually it's high school students, and your 4 high schools plus your alternative schools would be areas on which we would want to focus. Your work, our process lays out kind of when do we engage with you, kind of midway through our proposal. If you take a look, we'll have 3 meetings before we bring you our candidates, but we'll start by setting some initial parameters with you in a board meeting. We will bring back some other information to start the process of identifying such things as salary, interview questions, bringing forward further information. And then it's preparing for a few board meetings, but your real work starts when we bring you the pool of candidates that we believe match the criteria, your characteristics. And then we'll also be bringing you a ton of other information that we'll have gathered throughout the process. So you'll have a lot of reading. We do the legwork, and that's what our job is. We vet the candidates, we do the reference checking, we make sure that we have dug deep on each of the candidates, applicants, to see which ones would be candidates to come forward. And we spend a lot of time on that because we do that legwork. We call references and we do what we call 3 deep. We don't just take their initial references, we say, all right, who else do we need to talk to? If it's been a standing superintendent, we'll want to know what the mayor of the community might think. So we will reach out even to people that aren't on the reference checking. And so that's our work. We do a lot of that work. Janet, I don't want to overtalk. So Janet.
It's okay. I just may add, in terms of the stakeholder and that point person, it can be anyone. It can even be a vice president of the board who may have some free time, or even a board member, because that person's main job would be to coordinate the staff, engage human resources, engage all of the departments for any visits to the district. So it would be anyone who would have the ability to coordinate basically the process for the board. One other thing I may add in terms of the work for the district, stakeholder meetings, as Doug said, would be any and all organizations who may have a vested interest in our schools, but at the same time, those groups would come from the board. So that's more work for the board to identify those for us and allow us an opportunity to put those meetings together.
I think it's key. We'll meet with any and all groups that you want us to meet with. And because Gus is a part of our team, he also may know of some groups that that aren't normally addressed, and we want to make sure we don't leave any group out.
Great, thank you. So Alicia, you have the second question.
Sorry, I'm a slacker. Here we go. How would you use an equity lens to plan for community engagement in the search process?
Well, we know that you're looking at a equity lens, and so we've read your equity lens, and we would use that with you to start to identify those issues that are important to you, because it really comes down to what do you want to accomplish, number one, and number two, who's impacted, and how do we, and who should be involved. And that's really to me, the heart of what that equity lens would be, is to help guide, particularly the stakeholder input as we go through that process of identifying groups. The second thing would be, as we work with you on characteristics and traits, we would want to use that equity lens to identify candidates that are important to you in terms of bringing forward perhaps groups that have been underserved or marginalized, and or students of color, or excuse me, candidates of color. We have brought, I think one of the things about McPherson and Jacobson, we've placed over 850 superintendents. And in the last 5 years, a third of our applicants have been either women or people of color, and a third of our placements have been either women or people of color. So we have a good track record of looking at diverse candidates, because often when we talk about equity lens, we're talking about diversity of candidates. And I think we have a good track record of bringing forward candidates so that you can select the superintendent that best meets the needs of the 4J school district.
Also, the equity lens runs parallel to what we have in place at McPherson and Jacobson in terms of those important questions. So the equity lens goal, of course, is to serve or to put policies in place that will serve the underserved, and to force yourself as a board to recognize that equity is important. So what we have in place actually runs parallel to the equity lens, because those are all the things that we ask from your stakeholders and that you can, of course, ask from your candidates.
All right, Maya.
Hi, and welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there things you've done in past searches that you have learned from and would now do differently? And if so, how and what?
Janet, do you want to jump in on that?
That's a very good question, Maya, because what we have at McPherson is almost like a menu. It's a la carte. So based on the search for my board, as well as other searches that I've been on with McPherson and Jacobson, you can pick and choose what's best for your district based on your needs. So that is the beauty of being able to look at what we have available and cater it to the needs of your district.
And I think our process is thorough, it's detailed, it's rigorous, but it's your search. And so we'll customize it to your needs. But one of the things I've learned is that person who is the point of contact is absolutely critical. And being very clear about the responsibilities and expectations. And we're in a search right now where we thought we had a person who was doing that job well and hasn't met the expectation. And so we're having to work around that. One of the things we don't want to do is have the superintendent be the point of contact, but sometimes we have to not follow our typical rules. So I would say that's probably the one biggest lesson I've learned, is the key is that point of contact. And I think the second thing we've learned is that clarity of communication, clarity of expectations by all. That includes us with you, us with staff, and us with the people with whom we interact, be it the stakeholders, and that's all stakeholders, and then with candidates that applicants that we will be vetting, so that we're clear about what it is they bring to the table and do they meet the qualities and characteristics that you have identified. So it's really that strong level of deep communication.
Thank you.
Ready for the next question?
I think it's Mary.
Yes, it is. Okay. For your firm, how does conducting a search for a superintendent differ from a search for other high-level district administrators? In what concrete ways would your process differ?
I'm not sure we do very many, if any, high-level searches. I would say, almost all of our searches are for superintendents. And Janet?
I concur. Most of them are for that level?
I guess, Mary, what I would say is, from my experience, and that's hiring administrative staff at all levels prior to me working with McPherson and Jacobson, I wouldn't do it any differently. I think that every leadership position, whether it's an assistant principal at a school, whether it's a district level leader of a department, I believe you follow the same exact steps. You're transparent, you're clear on what you're looking for, you work with the stakeholders that are impacted by that decision. You make sure that no matter what, you communicate with those stakeholders, you involve them. When I was a superintendent and hiring people, the process we used when I was a superintendent is almost the exact same process we used with McPherson and Jacobson. We would have stakeholder meetings, we would have community forums, we would dig deep on any of the candidates, we would recruit to meet the characteristics and qualities for which we were looking. I don't see it very differently. It's transparent, it's visible, it involves those people who are most impacted by that decision. And I believe that for a really long time as I've been hiring leaders in my various roles.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm up, and I just want to say that I'm dealing with an injury, and so I know that I have winced more than a few times, and I wouldn't want you all, like if I were in your position and someone who was on a panel interviewing me was wincing, that might make me feel very concerned. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that that body language was about me and not you.
Okay, well, I was beginning to wonder, and I apologize for drinking tea. I'm coming off a bout of breakthrough COVID, and I'm still feeling kind of the residual of it, but you know, it's just the way it is.
No, you never have to apologize for drinking liquids. Those are good things for human bodies to do, and I'm glad that you're feeling better. Okay, here's your question then. What steps would you take to find a superintendent with a proven track record of successfully implementing an equity lens? And how would those steps be different from a standard search procedure?
Well, first of all, I don't know if they would be different, because one of the qualities and characteristics it seems to me you're asking is, if that is a quality and characteristic that you're looking for in the candidates we bring forward, that would be one of the criteria on which we would be vetting candidates. And any and all qualities and characteristics that you want in candidates, we would look to and research. So we would be wanting to know how candidates have used and been successful using an equity lens. We would do that in several ways. First of all, it would be something we would hope they would address in their application and resume. If we put that in our advertisement, we would hope they would, which again, we'd have to work with you if you'd want that in the advertisement, because if that's in the posting, they better speak to the posting. That's just kind of standard protocol. But if that's what an important characteristic and criteria for you, then that's the first place we would look to. Secondly, as we start to vet the candidates and look at references, we will go back to our posting qualities and characteristics that we've developed with you, and we will ask those references directly about that. We will know whether it's just something they've written down, or if in actual fact, it's something that is occurred. And so we will be, in our reference checking, we will dig deep on that. And like I said, we do the 3 deep. We don't just go to the references they've provided. We ask those references, who else should we talk to? And we ask again and again until we feel we have a very clear picture to bring to you who that candidate is. And that's, I think, probably the hallmark of, one of our hallmarks is, I don't think anybody will outwork us. We're diligent. We have a passion for this work because it's important to us to make sure that we have strong leadership in K through 12 education. I've devoted 50 years of my life to this enterprise, and I want to see it continue to be really strong. And so we're like I say, I hate this may be awful, and if I offend somebody, we're a dog on a bone. We're going to make sure we really get after it. So Janet, what would you say?
Well, I would add, as board members, you have a very hard job. This is a tough decision. It's a serious decision. It's one that we don't take lightly. Unfortunately, we don't have to hire the superintendent. Our job would be to bring the best possible candidates based on the framework or the frame that you've given us and to present them to you. But your work starts at that point because with the interviews and all of the steps in the process, it's a tough decision. But we will bring, based on your criteria, those candidates to you for you to choose.
And if that's what you want us to vet for, we will dig deep. And that's our commitment to you.
Hello.
No.
How do you find candidates for positions? What networks or sources do you tap into? And how do you connect with them?
Janet, you want to jump in on that?
That's a very good question because it's a wide network. Of course, social media. We have our platform, our website. We also will request that we utilize the district's website in terms of announcing all of the meetings, all of the stakeholder meetings, all of the board meetings, putting the surveys and everything on your site as well. But all of the advertisement, the ones that we have coupled with yours, are just some of the ways that we're able to reach those candidates and look for to just widen the net to get more candidates based on your criteria.
We do, to add to what Janet said, we post all of our positions on our website. And we're a known entity. Our website receives over 200,000 hits per month. We don't represent candidates, but we have candidates who have registered with us, and so they're looking. So that's one way. Our advertising goes, and I think it's in the proposal, but we do, let me see, we go to American Association of School Administrators, we go to the top jobs, we go to ALIS for the Latinx administrators, of which Gustavo is the national president. So that's we rely on him to be identifying colleagues. We also do the National Association of Black Educators, advertise there. That was in the proposal. We have 125 consultants nationwide. Once we post the position, we give them the posting, ask them to recommend candidates. And so we do a whole lot of outreach through all those means. Plus, where in the past, whether they're conferences now, but we use our contacts at various conferences to try to contact candidates and to meet with candidates. And I think, what was the last part of your question about how do we interact with them?
The last part is what networks or sources you tapped in and how do you connect with them?
Well, through all of those means, and we use the people that we know. One of the first things we'll do is because we're, I like to say we're local with a national outreach, we will use our network here in Oregon and Washington. We'll work with COSA to identify folks that they might know of, and then we'll start to work through other our network here in the Northwest. And then we'll use our network of 125 consultants nationwide and utilize them to provide recommendations for us. And I will personally, and I just finished this for another search, I'll call people that whose names come to us and encourage them to apply and answer their questions. I think that personal touch is extremely important. Just an aside, I wasn't looking to become the superintendent in Ben Lapine, but I was at a school board conference and I got a tap on the shoulder from the search firm and they said, "You ought to apply in Bend." And I said, I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school and she wants to graduate from Pullman High. And the comment was, I'll never forget, everybody has a sophomore daughter. And so it's that personal touch that might get people who are great candidates to take the step to apply. So as we start to look at the broad network and the broad range of people who would make good candidates, we will do that personal outreach. And it's working the phones, it's talking to people, it's using those folks that we have. And like I say, Gustavo being the president of ALIS, he's got a great network with whom he can work in that regard. And my work as with the Oregon School Boards Association, I know school board members from all over the state. I can also tap into them. So all of those things that we have in our hip pocket, we will use.
Great. I have the next question. It's good to see both of you again.
Good to see you.
The question I wanted to ask is this: public input into a decision like this can sometimes be too scattershot to be useful, producing a wide range of comments from a large number of people, but who may not be representative of the community at large. So our question is, how do you go about getting deep and meaningful input from the community at large or from specific parts of the community?
Well, let's back up to who do we reach out to initially? And I think that part of the premise of your question is it's just scattershot. Well, we want to be focused on with whom we do our stakeholder meetings. So we want to make sure that we're talking to the groups and the people that you believe will provide deep and meaningful input. So that's the first thing we will do. Now, we'll get scattershot in those too. When we do the survey, we'll get scattershot, especially when we put it out to the entire community. We ask 4 basic questions, and we found these 4 basic questions to generate a good conversation. And so this is what we do with the stakeholder groups. Number 1, what do you like about your community? What's good about your community? What's good about the school district? What are the issues? What are the characteristics and qualities you want in the new superintendent? Amazingly, there's a lot of commonality that comes through those questions. But this is your search. And if you want us to find more information, we will work with you on what questions you want answered to get to that deep level. It's, again, we customize to what you want, but we have a track record of getting a lot of good information, probably more than, I think you hit it, Gordon, probably more than you want. But it's what people are saying about the district. And what we'll do is we'll gather all the information, we'll summarize it, and we'll present it to you. We'll also give it to candidates because they want to know. They want to know those same things. And so, it's the transparency in our process, which enables you and your community and candidates to really have a good sense of the process. Now, when we do the stakeholder, when we do the survey, it's a Survey Monkey, we'll give you the raw data. And the only thing we'll take out is any profanity and any names. Otherwise, you'll get everything, including bad grammar and bad spelling, but it'll be what your community has sent you. But we will make sure that we've given you a good summary so that you can have a good sense of what's coming together. The one thing I found, and I think this is something that's true in most situations, what you are looking for and the things that are important to you are the same things that are important to the community. You are the community's representatives, and it's amazing how what you believe and what you bring forward is the same thing that's from your community. But I think our questions are the base, and if you want more, we'll work with you to develop those questions and to make sure you get the feedback that you're looking for. Janet, I don't know that.
Well, out of those 4 questions that we ask each one of the stakeholder groups, you'd be surprised the amount of information that we can gather. The issues are often repetitive. We find out employee-related issues that the board may not be aware of, but the information runs parallel to the equity lens, because a lot of the things they may share with me when I ask those questions, and once it becomes repetitive, then the board can easily identify, hey, this is an issue here, and it may be something that we need to insert or address in our equity lens for the board, because this is how we allocate the money. This is how we make our policy. So how can we know where to put our funding to assist the underserved unless we uncover any issues that they may have? So I'm certain that any answers, and once we do the summary, will be very valuable to the board.
And so that's the information we bring forward. And I think we failed to say, we will run the stakeholder meetings. We'll make sure that those stakeholder meetings are run by members of our team for Spanish language meetings. We will make sure that the person is bilingual. One of the members of our team is a retired superintendent from California. She is bilingual. She will run those Spanish language stakeholder meetings. We will make sure the survey is also in at least Spanish and any other language as best we can that you might want to make sure is identified within your community. And I think it's important that our commitment is to make sure we're bringing clarity to this process by working with each of those groups and then providing you those kind of data that really help you make an informed decision. So it's a lot of that work bringing things together.
Thank you.
So believe it or not, we're on question 8.
No, quick.
You guys are killing it. Good. What's your process for doing reference checks on candidates? I think you've talked some about that. We got the 3 deep checks, but if you want to at all, that was our last question.
So are you talking before we bring you the candidate or after we, at what point? Because there's several things we do. So I just want to make sure, is it just everything?
Yeah, I didn't realize you do it at more than one point. So tell us, where you, at what points and what you do.
Yeah, obviously, I think I've already talked a lot about the 3 deep. And before we bring you a pool of candidates, we will have done a very thorough background and reference check on each of those candidates. So we want to know, do they meet your qualities, characteristics, and criteria? So you then will have a good view of who those candidates are. Part of our proposal is, we call it the short list, the top 3. We will bring, we'll ask them to do a 3-minute video that you will see. And so it'll give you a sense of who they are, how they respond. And then once we have gotten to the point of who the finalists are, we will continue just to make sure we massage it to see if there's anything else out there. And then the final reference check, we'll do a financial, we'll do a criminal, and we'll do a credential check to make sure that there's nothing in that person's background that will embarrass you as a board. I won't mention the district, but it's a large district in Oregon that got down to the point of their finalists, and there were some issues that came forward that should have been caught. We will, our job is to ensure that does not happen to you, because we will make sure that we'll have left no stone unturned to find out about those folks.
Great.
Janet, I don't know if there's anything else.
No, I think you got it all there.
So I think those were our 8 questions, and we're done a little bit early, but that gives you time. If you do have any questions for us.
Well, I guess I want to come back to, I was looking at your equity lens, and the first question is, what do you want to accomplish? So what do you want to accomplish in this search?
Does anyone want to respond? I'll start off, and other people might want to add in, but I know what I'd like to accomplish is finding a great superintendent for our district that will help us continue to grow and deepen our equity work, get good outcomes for all of our students to graduate. I'm just looking for a good outcome. Maya.
I share that same hope as Judy, and I would like to have the process that leads to that include genuine, authentic, deep community outreach.
You know, one thing I would like to say, our process brings people together, brings the community together, and it brings the board together, because this is the most important decision you're going to make. And you've got to, as you work through each step, be real clear as a board what it is you want, and to communicate directly with each other. I've seen boards fall apart over this process, but it's important that you all do exactly what's been said. You keep an eye on the end goal, and you keep an eye on how you bring people together so that you come together to represent your community well.
Other questions for us?
I don't know if anybody else wanted to respond to that. Janet, did you have anything else?
Well, I just would like to add that I would like to just mention about the flexibility. It's not a cookie cutter approach, because your board and your community, no one knows it better than you and the districts that you represent. So here in working with McPherson and Jacobson, we've been able to be flexible in terms of the meetings, the stakeholder groups, going over and above what's on the information that we've sent you, because we realize that every community is different. It's diverse. And we are here to try to address those needs as they present themselves.
Thank you. Laurel.
I had thought I had heard, and I can't remember which question, but I think it had to do with talking to stakeholders, and I thought I had heard those 4 questions. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I had understood that right in my notes. Thank you.
With the caveat, if you have some other information that you want gathered, we would work with you on those. So in addition to our 4. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I remember when we did our search, we had the 4 or 5 different stakeholder meetings, and McPherson and Jacobson, they were able to ask their questions. However, our community requested a public community meeting, just a mix of anyone who wanted to come. And those questions were given by the board, questions to the audience, and the audience had an opportunity to sign a card or come up and ask a question of the board. So that also can be a consideration for your board. If you have a community that may demand just one open meeting, you can also opt to do that to get more information and to serve the needs of them.
And I think it's something we probably failed to say, but it goes back to the question of bringing the community together. We'll work with you on identifying groups, and we'll work to set up those stakeholder meetings. And they can be, I think right now, Steve is working with Greater Albany. They have 21 stakeholder meetings. That might be a bit much, but 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range is pretty more typical. But again, it's what you want in your search and who you want us to connect so that you get information from them. Like Janet said, it's sometimes a little safer to talk to us about what it is they're concerned about and what they want for their district.
Okay, I want to give anyone else a chance to respond from the board, and if not, we'll tell you what our next steps are. That we will be chatting a bit after this meeting, and then tomorrow we have a board meeting, and our plan is to choose a search firm tomorrow. So we'll be letting you know what happens then.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate this opportunity, and would be remiss to say, we hope it's us that you select. We really look forward to working with the Eugene 4J district. You've got a great track record, and we just like to be a part of that process.
And it was nice meeting each one of you. Thank you for your time and this opportunity. And we would love to have your business.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time tonight and answering all of our many questions. So have a good evening.
And again, apology for Steve and Gustavo. You got Janet and I, and I hope we comported ourselves well for the community, for the firm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Okay. I don't know that we've ever finished anything early, so this is good. I think the next step is to take, let's see, how long, maybe let's take a 10-minute break and don't forget to fill out your feedback forms on the interviews, jot them down, and then we'll come back into executive session and have any conversations we want to have there. And then we will go back to Zoom. We'll do a lot of moving around.
So what time should we plan on going into the executive session? Exactly.
How about, let's say 10 to 8.
Great, thank you.
Carrie, are you emailing that to us also, or should we just click it and then go in and then close our screens down?
Yes, you can copy the link here where board members can see it, or in your 4J email. The link has also been sent to you. For members of the audience who would like to remain for when the board reconvenes in the work session, this Zoom should remain open. And if you'll just stand by until the board comes back.
All right, we all made it back. Great. So we are resuming our public meeting here, our work session. And what we're going to be doing now, for those of you who are listening, is every board member we're going to start with the ALMA group, and every board member will have, I'm going to say 2 minutes to go through, you don't have to take all the time, some strengths that you saw in the interview and some wonderings or concerns. And I'm going to start because I'm just going to call on people, if that's all right. And I'm going to say Gordon's up first on my view.
Okay, I hadn't quite collected all my thoughts, but
Do you want a second? I don't want to hurry you if someone feels
actually,
like...
if I could go something other than first,
okay,
that would be a little better for me.
Anyone willing to go first? Oh, Martina, thank you.
Sure, I'll jump in and go first. Some of the strengths that I saw in Alma's second interview, I really appreciated the way that they spoke to student input, the way that it was valued and encouraged, and I liked hearing about student participation at multiple levels, including, actually leading their own interviews. I really loved hearing them be reflective on their previous experiences and share like what they've learned and you know, really addressed a lot of the concerns that I had previously had. And finally, one thing that I thought was really unique was there was one moment when they shared that, you know, one of the things that they would want to deliver to the board along with the final candidate is also, you know, where they think that candidate maybe needs support, particularly in the work towards equity, and that they would be offering specifically like what support they believe this candidate would need from the board to be a successful superintendent, which I really thought was a wonderful piece of like added value in really understanding that everyone is imperfect and a work in progress, and that we will continue to supervise that person hopefully for many years. I don't really have any wonderings or concerns at this point. I really see a lot of value added beyond just the, you know, hopefully the person that we will hire, but also with a lot of the other framework that it seems like they could offer.
Who's willing to go next? Laura.
I was really excited the first time we saw them in the interview, but excuse me, I think they did just much, I don't know if it was better. Just the clarity of their answers was amazing. It was really helpful. They really went in depth for everything. They didn't kind of wax poetic at any time. They really answered the questions with detail, and I appreciated that. There's no way you can say that there wasn't detail in those answers. I also was looking at how they interacted together, and there was a real, I can wax poetic forever, I'll try not to. But I really appreciated how they worked together. Obviously, it's a very cohesive team, and they've put together some amazing people. I like the fact that we have the ability to be part of hiring them to help us with what we're doing, using techniques that aren't the norm yet. A lot is the old-fashioned norm, and they're the avant-garde. They're saying things that I want to hear, like who they're listening to, whose voice is valuable. They were so in depth about the value of stakeholders, and they didn't just say stakeholders a lot. They said who on the stakeholders, and they said they would be doing this work. They would give us a lot of choices of questions. I love that. And they kept talking about the work that they do. And I appreciated that. It sounds like, and I also liked when I have written down from my notes from, I would say the only concern I had was about the search process and what would you do differently. And they were very honest about, we had some things we needed to look at and change, and we've done it. And then they talked about that in many of the other questions. So I'm excited about the work that they could do for us. And I'm excited about the fact that we wouldn't stay in the status quo. We would get, and they talked about that, really look at the equity. You know, I talk about the foundational equity. That is part of who they are. And if we're serious about foundational equity, we are going to go with them. Thanks. Do
you have any wonderings to add?
My wonderings about
concerns or wonderings about Alma?
No, they addressed it.
Okay. I'm just checking.
I mean, in ratio to the other, if there was another candidate out there, I think they addressed it in ratio to the other candidate.
Okay, thank you. Alicia, I see you're unmuted. Are you ready to go?
I don't know why I'm unmuted. No, it's good. You can pick out somebody else.
Okay. Gordon, Maya, Mary. Gordon, go. Okay, great.
You've given me enough time. So for me, I feel like, there's obviously questions that come up from them being relatively newer in this work. But it ended up making me feel like, or making me think that they will conduct a search that actually is specifically tailored for us. And in some way, because of their newness, and they don't have a standard procedure. I thought they were convincing and serious in building the search around competencies. Mostly, I thought they were really strongly focused and sophisticated about how to get meaningful community input, and the way they described how they would run those meetings. They don't have a Survey Monkey tool, which is fairly common in the industry, and I experience mostly is like not that useful kind of input. And they talked about trying to figure out how to be straight with stakeholders and community about was their input really going to matter? Like, was it really going to be taken into account? And that in a very honest way. And that felt to me like the process would help also build trust between whoever participates in this and us and the board, which I think is good. They talked about, it seemed like a tailored search to me, that they talked about where they would post advertisements and developing a prospecting and connector list specifically for this search. I also appreciated that they were straightforward about having learned things in the Denver search. Obviously, their newness means, okay, so you learn things from one place, you could still make more mistakes in your second or third place because you haven't done it 100 times. But really, nothing felt canned to me. They're obviously, I think, very strong on equity, which they offered to, that part of their normal process is to give us as the board training on implicit bias before we start this process. When they talked about how would they, if we wanted to identify somebody who had a proven record of implementing an equity lens or equity agenda, I felt like they really would know how to do that, as opposed to just saying, well, whatever you want, we can get whatever you want. They're significantly more expensive. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think they were more than twice what the other firm, 3 times what the other firm put in. When I first looked at it, that was a big concern for me. And certainly if other things were kind of equal, that would be a concern for me. But the amounts of money, I think their bid was like 78 or 75, something, I think was something around there. Really, the amounts of money that we're talking about are tiny in our overall budget. And given that this is the most important decision we're probably going to make as board members, to me, the cost ends up being not determinative. It was a concern at the beginning. So that's more or less what I.
And that was any wonderings or concerns other?
Well, cost was a concern. And I think, kind of saying we're going to go with somebody who's relatively newer, who if they've done Denver and Cincinnati and will be their 3rd, maybe their 4th superintendent search, has both, obviously there's certain risks that what you're going to get with somebody who's done it 100 times, but so those were wonderings, but they got outweighed to me by the benefits from that.
Great, thank you. We have Maya, Mary, Alicia. I can go if people want, but then someone else is going to have to go. So I'm happy to go since everyone's reluctant. So let me get the right one here. Strengths. I liked that they called out that they'd be looking for what candidates had done rather than just what they believe. I thought their community engagement process was very robust, and their student inclusion of student voice. They had some really good ideas. I like that they did as part of their routine, or if they have a routine, but searches anti-bias training and their experience with equity. Their creation of the competency seems to be individual and individualized and careful. And I was glad just about their insight about what they had learned, but they are new, and so they are still learning. Some of my wonderings were really about their inexperience. None of them have been superintendents, and their inexperience recruiting for superintendents. That is, and no one's been on a board. So a little bit of experience in that way, that makes me a little nervous. Their networks are not super robust. They're not, there are national and local networks for administrators of color and other, they just, you know, I don't know about their networks. I was worried when they mentioned spring recruiting because that seems very late. We have to really get going faster than that, I think. And their costs, I think their costs were really of concern to me, and we couldn't, because the searches that they've done, I don't know if there's going to be anything outside of their cost. If it stays at the level it is and doesn't get charged extra for travel and other things, that I'd feel differently about it, but I don't know. Didn't get a chance to ask that question. So those are my strengths and wonderings.
I'd like to point out, you gave us a break, but you gave us homework. I took the break, which is typical what I did in school too. So sorry, I've been trying to catch up. And as typical what I did in school, I'm stealing some of your ideas. So I do appreciate what everybody said. And I appreciate we all come at this differently, you know, so for one person, oh, it made perfect sense. It really, you know, I got clarity on my answers. And for some of us, it's like, oh, it gave me more questions on both these firms. So I think that there are ways that it may be really clear for you, but other people have different questions. So I just tack on with you guys what you said about community outreach. I thought that was great. I think that's really important in 4J, how we do that, how we bring people in. It's, you know, not clear who's facilitating those and whether they'll be in person or not. So those are, you know, some of the things I wish I had thought about because I was on the committee that wrote the questions and didn't think to get that clarity. So like that, you know, again, some of the things that you guys talked about, not a filter here, but to be a microphone was good. That was one of the quotes that was about, they said something, what do you need to hear from Alma to make sure you feel heard? And that kind of put the onus on them. Some people may like that, some people may not like that because it's not about Alma, it's about us. So that depends on how you feel about that. A lot of good outreach. I, like Judy, I'm wondering why it's 3 times more for a firm that has done one search. And people talked about doing more than one, but they're right in the middle of Cincinnati. They haven't completed it. One of the things that made me a little, was a wondering for me was no mention of the caucuses, of the work that I know administrators of color have done to build these caucuses. And they didn't seem to have that connection, or at least they didn't mention it. One of the things we talked about was we wanted a firm that didn't just have a bullpen, if you will, and they bring people out. And I wasn't sure, listening to them, if that's kind of what they did. They did talk about fit a lot, and to make sure it was a great fit and a customized, strong fit. That was interesting because they didn't use that word last time. So those are my wonderings. This is a big deal for us. And I'd heard comments before, like, it doesn't really matter which firm, but I really think it does. And I'm really glad we're going in depth on this, because this is our first test as a board to make sure that we're all comfortable and good and understand this is the first step in our process. I, of course, am really nervous about how late we're starting this. So those are my wonderings and thoughts. And I think that's all. Thanks.
Mary or Maya?
Mary, do you want to go ahead, or are you not ready yet?
You go.
Okay. I've been also scrambling to finish my homework on the bus on the way to school. So, and I have to be honest, the part of the homework that I'm having the hardest time with is the wonderings and concerns, because the ones that I come up with also, I feel like I need to put an arrow into the positives. They're wonderings and concerns, but I also feel as though they're important places to, for me anyway, to see positive. So they are clearly new to the game. They haven't been in education for 50 years, but that excites me. That makes me feel really excited that we have a new perspective on this process. And it means to me that there's more chance that we'll be getting a firm that approaches this with thoughtfulness, and not to say the other one, and I'm not trying to compare. So I'll leave that, sorry. That brings me over to the positives, which is the question we asked about what they learned. And I was pleasantly surprised by the amount they were willing to share. They were so forthright about what they learned in the last process, and it ticked off a whole lot of my previous concerns about them. I loved how they talked about the roles. They didn't give an hour amount, but they did make it really clear where people would come in and how they expected people to come in. The other concern that I came to that also felt like a positive is the one that's been mentioned, which is cost. But then I also, in the back of my head, kept hearing my grandmother be like, you don't skimp, you get what you pay for. And to me, we keep saying over and over and over that the superintendent position and hiring of a superintendent is our most important job. And it feels as though this isn't a place where I want to be driven by a desire to save money or to make that choice based on cost, when I am not personally having questions about their ability to fulfill the mission that we put forth. I love that all three of them came back. I thought that was really exciting. 2 of them from the East Coast, 1 from the West Coast. None of them were at home, and they all came back, and that felt really important. The community engagement, I know I'm just kind of saying the same thing everybody else said, but I'm going to repeat that quote that Alicia just shared, because it was one of those moments where I wrote down the quote, which is, we're not here to be a filter for the community, we're here to be a microphone. And that feels like something that Eugene in this particular moment not only needs for a superintendent search, but just needs in general in terms of its relationship to 4J. The last one, I love that this is women run, that this is a firm that is owned and operated, and like the whole process is run by women, and 2 women of color, and specifically the one that is the person at the very top is an Afro-Latina. And right now in Oregon, our demographic that's increasing at the highest rate are not just Latinos, but Afro-Latinos. And I think that makes me very excited. It feels like there's an authentic and sincere connection to anti-racist consciousness. And that makes it feel really cutting edge. And that I anticipate them to be really well positioned to break from the traditional route of hiring a superintendent. And I'm excited about that. And I could talk forever, because they, like Laurel, last time I was like, oh, that's exciting. And this time I was like, I didn't even change color pens because I was so excited. I couldn't stop to change my color. So.
Okay, Mary, thank you. In terms of things I thought were helpful, I like the answer about Denver, because they evidently learned about the importance of role clarity, which had bothered me the first time around. They define their role, which is a plus or minus, as content developers. And, you know, we don't have a bunch of staff. We are hiring them to, you know, do a lot of the legwork for us, because we're a volunteer board. So I think on one hand, it's a positive. On the other hand, I still have some wonderings about it. Like Judy said, I'm concerned about their capacity, or at least their relative lack of experience. This is our #1 most important job. I want to hire the best talent we can. I'm not sure that I want this to be a training opportunity for for people. And I'm glad they're a DBE, and there's probably not a stronger feminist among us than me in some way. So I'm glad of that. I just worry about their ability to deliver. The capacity, as I understand, we have 8 people altogether across the country. They're engaged in big searches right now. And I continue to be concerned about the relative cost of it and the timeline. As I said, this is November 15th. We have the holidays mixed in. We're not going to get to this realistically in terms of community engagement until the middle of January. And if there are other competing firms, firms that are other searches that are in districts our size, I'm very concerned. I know there's one immediately north of us, in the Northwest. So I'm just concerned about their ability to deliver in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you. I think everyone had a chance to share. And now we'll do the same process with the McPherson and Jacobson group. Any volunteers to go first with that one?
Can we go in the opposite order, maybe, just to keep it fair?
Oh, in reverse order?
Yeah.
We could do that. Mary, do you want to start with McPherson and Jacobson? No. Okay. Alicia, you were next. Nope. Maya?
That would be me. And I will, yes, I'm ready. Again, the quotes, and I'm going to turn it over. When they were talking about the tasks, and they referenced that they need a point of contact person, and they referenced that repeatedly in different points in their interview, that was a really important part for them. And then they said that person almost gets a full-time job. And they listed 2 possibilities for that job. And I'm pretty sure that neither of those 2 people are in a place to take on a full-time job. And I know they were examples, but it just set my kind of tingly senses off to hear that they expect us to have 1 point person and that person would be doing that much work. I also, I loved and I love that they have a familiarity with the Pacific Northwest. I think that Doug Nelson, I should call him Douglas. His name said Douglas on there. That he has been a superintendent at Bend Lapine. So Oregon is not unfamiliar because we are, in terms of school financing stuff, I do think that we are unique. Everyone thinks they're unique, but we are unique in that capacity. I didn't like that only 2 of them came back. I know that we didn't give them much time. I want to feel special, and I want to feel like we're the most important when we're in the process of interviewing. So that was something that I did notice. I was very concerned about them saying that they have 4 basic questions that they ask everybody. That made me, and I thought that the questions were decent questions, but I thought they were also very, a little bit more generic than I would have liked personally. And it made me feel like we weren't being seen as having deserving of tailoring of those questions. I also didn't hear them saying very forthrightly what they have learned. And I know they've been doing this for a long time. So maybe they have done all the learning that they anticipate doing. But in my opinion, in this kind of work, you should be constantly, continuously learning, especially as new concepts are emerging. So that's another one for me in terms of concerns. Another quote that I did like, or a quote that I did like, is that they said our process brings people together. That's always a selling point for me. I wasn't sure exactly how that would happen, honestly, but I did like that. I think that the guy that was in charge, Douglas Nelson, is very well tuned into education systems. That was apparent in the conversation, and he is that's undeniable. As is their their familiarity and connections to things like ALAS, et cetera. But again, that makes me wonder if they go outside of the box that they have crafted for themselves in the formula that they have in place.
Thank you. Who else would like to go next? Well, I'm going to go. Oh, go ahead. Are you ready, Alicia?
I didn't even get a bus ride on this one. So one of the things I think is interesting doing this is, you know, that I talked about it before, that attribution error, that if we like somebody, we see certain things as good, and if we don't. And so I'm just listening to this, and it's just, you know, what kind of moves us and what kind of speaks to us. And so I'm just going to read, let's see, this is my scariest quote from our meetings. We have seen boards fall apart during this process. And while we're all going to give our attribution to the ones we like or don't, or, you know, that speak to us or kind of hit us, you know, I think we have to be really aware of that. And I'm really aware of that. So even talking about the things that I would want to see different, or that I liked or didn't like, I want to be really careful that I'm not challenging my board members, because they see it. You know, I could go through Maya's and go, well, Maya, let me tell you why I think you're wrong. And I just don't want us to do that. And I appreciate we aren't. I just really appreciate that. And I just want to keep us on that positive. And I appreciate getting to hear all of these things, getting to hear what's important in my fellow board members' life as they make these decisions, because this is a big decision. So on that end, I know you guys are like, okay, Alicia, but give us your answers. Hold on, I got to get to my notes. So it's funny because I listened to the Division of Labor and I thought, you are brutally honest. It is going to take that much time. Either firm we pick. It's the third time I've been through it, and either firm we pick, we got to figure out how we're going to staff that, because it's going to take that much. I really like that they knew our equity lens. They talked about our equity lens. They talked about a point person from the board, and I'm pretty sure I saw all of us put our heads down. They like the a la carte part that they talked about, and that you know, each search is different. So the 4 questions seem to be the core, but you build from there. That's the way I heard it. I would be very concerned if that was it. Like, yeah, we're going to ask these 4 questions and that's it. Again, I really appreciate that we have administrators of color who have worked very hard on their caucuses, and I like that they honored that. They had that connection. That was good for me. You know, I like their 3 deep checks. I thought that was good. I'm a little scared about the 3-minute video. If I were applying for the job, I would be. I thought they did really well on the equity question, but Maya, I cannot beat your woman-owned feminist piece. And I am absolutely, Mary, I'll give you a little ahead of me, but I don't know why. Being a feminist, I'm looking on the board and I'm guessing we could all be fighting for that. Who's number one? So I did like that. I like the 100 and some consultants. So I see them being able to, each one of those people would bring something unique or different to it. Again, I'm worried about how late we're starting this. And, so I think that's it. With both, you know, I just will say, wrapping up, I have concerns. I have likes. I have concerns with both of them. They aren't perfect, but no one is. And I appreciate hearing you guys' feedback on it. So thanks.
Anyone else ready? Okay, Martina.
I'm breaking out of our reverse order plan, but Yeah, I mean, I think that when I look at McPherson Jacobson, I see a lot of history and a lot of experience and a lot of network, and that's not something that I can discount, right? Those are things, and I do want to give credit to that. I will say what I felt coming out of that was that a lot of the answers that I heard were pretty comparable. I went back and looked at my quotes from the last interview, and they were pretty comparable to the answers that we got the first time. Really, some of the same pull quotes even for me. And I just don't know if I felt like I got deeper on some of the reasons that we wanted to have a second interview. And I think one of the things that stands out most is that they said a lot of times, like, we'll meet with any group you want us to meet with, you know, you can pick and choose what you think is best. And I can really hear that landing in like a really positive way for some folks. And I'm really trying to put myself in that position of being like, wow, that could feel really great. I also, though, hear that as not having mechanisms in place to check our biases, and not having systems in place that really challenge the way things have been. I see them as being really like a wonderful standard bearer for the way these kinds of searches have gone. Maybe not for the entirety of the last 50 years, but for a long time. And there's a lot of good that has come out of that. I also just am not necessarily seeing them push past that standard and interrogate what about that standard way of operating has not worked to challenge systems of oppression, and in what ways has that standard operating procedure, you know, in some ways upheld those systems of oppression that I think we are really looking towards, or at least I'll say that I am working towards dismantling in the ways that I can. So I have no doubt that they would be able to, you know, deliver some candidates that would be really impressive. And I just don't know if I see them offering us something different.
See, we haven't heard from Gordon or Laurel or Mary or me. Okay, I'll go, but then someone has to be up next. So, okay. I also, I mean, many of the pluses have been noted. I think their networks, both locally and national, are wide in their connections with the national and local caucuses of color. And they have they just have a huge network. I can't, you know, I think that is pretty clear. I like that what they said from their experience. Their goal is to bring clarity to the process, because I think that is actually important. I think especially for a new board, many of us have never been through a search. 2 of us have, but the rest of us haven't. So a little clarity and direction would be helpful for me. I did like their in-depth background checks. I'm one who really does believe reference checks are critically important to a process of hiring. I liked that they talked, so this is both a strength. They seem very willing to be flexible, and they talked about having more of a menu of things that we could choose from. And that was a wondering of mine, is how flexible they would be. So it was sort of both. I heard that, and it was also a wondering. I did really appreciate them about being realistic about time, because I've done a lot of reference checks I did this last time too, and I'm not referring to any of them, but there is no reference out there that said this isn't a huge lift of time. And I appreciated their realism about it, because I think it really is, both for staff and for us. And let's see. And I think my wondering, I already mentioned one of the wonderings. My other is about their dedication experience to getting maybe more authentic input or voices. So that was me. We have Laurel and Mary to go. Oh, Gordon, you haven't gone. Have you? You have gone. No, okay, sorry. Go ahead. Are you ready?
I can talk. Maybe you just know what I'm going to say, so it feels like I've gone. So, I mean, this is kind of similar to what other people have said. To me, McPherson's strengths and weaknesses, or strengths and wonderings, are kind of the same, which is they're very experienced. Like, I don't have any question. It doesn't feel like I'm taking a risk and I'm not sure how it's going to come out. They're very experienced. They obviously know how to do this. They have people with a lot of experience on their staff and their national network. All of which is serious and is a good plus. The flip side of that, to me, felt like it didn't really feel that anything that would be particularly unique to us, even though, like, I also saw that, well, it's kind of a menu and you can pick whatever you want, which in one way feels like, okay, you can customize it however you want, but in another way also feels like we don't, we'll add another question or we'll add another filter. And I think they have a great, I mean, it said they have like 200,000 hits and I assume a lot of people who are registered on their website, which is a great strength. But all the meetings and outreach that they do, which makes sense, is kind of a national program. And then somehow they attract a whole lot of people on an ongoing basis who are interested in candidates that seem to me, and then go through that and filter out for whatever we say our criteria are, which is very good, but also is different from what felt to me. It was not saying, okay, we're going to start with you and then figure out and then look for somebody who is specifically that, as opposed to just like set a bunch of filters. I think a big, I guess, wondering or concern for me is about the community input. When we asked, how would you use the equity lens to guide community input, there wasn't really an answer to that, except that we'll meet with whoever you want us to meet with, and we'll ask whatever questions you want, which is fair, but was different from saying, oh, we actually have an idea of what that might mean in terms of proactive outreach or how we engage people. And it kind of felt also like when we asked, how would you go about finding somebody with a proven track record on an equity lens? I believe that everybody's totally committed to that, but it kind of felt like another menu item. Like, if that's what you want, we'll ask about that, which is, again, is fair, but is different from a firm who could say, oh, this is actually what we specialize in and get, and we have ideas for how to find people or how to really tell if something has happened versus if people say something has happened. So I guess, that's kind of like having the big network, having the standard way you do it, having lots and lots of contacts around the country, both feels like a strength. And the concern is kind of like, if I think, okay, I want somebody who's somewhat of a change agent in some way around equity or maybe around some other things, I feel like I'm going to get somebody who is that they're not as well set up to do that kind of search, I guess I would say. That was my concern.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Gordon. I didn't anticipate what you were going to say. Okay, I'm going to go with Mary. Would you be able to speak since you went last time? That'd be great.
Certainly. Well, I hear this need to shake up the district, and that's what people want. People want change. I don't disagree with that. The reality is you have to find the candidates who are willing to do that and who are willing to have the skills, expertise, community relations, working with people to make that change happen if that's what we want. That might be the equity lens, it might be community engagement, it might be more transparency. But the fact is you have to invest in the candidates, you have to invest in looking for the candidates. And that's where I sort of have this discomfort around, we need all this change and we're gonna hire a firm. We don't like them because they've got experience. Well, their national network is what continues to impress me. They've got the National Superintendent of the Year as a consultant. They've got other superintendents of the year in different states. I am impressed with the fact they've got a board member who actually understands what it's like to be in our shoes. And she acknowledged more than once, it's a hard job. And I think that's entirely true. So I'm glad that they have that experience and try to cover all their bases. And the fact that not all of them were there, I don't think is a slight to us. It's just they were busy because they're doing other superintendent searches, what again gets to back my concern about time and capacity and the ability to do that. The other thing are the wonderings. The wonderings as I've gone back and looked at the proposal again, the cost still seems to be something that I think is reasonable. But again, in reviewing that section, they do a service after the sale. They help with the contract, if that's what you want to do. And that's not an easy job necessarily. They can help draft a contract, and they can work with a new superintendent to set up goals, to get getting a good start for a new superintendent. And so I just think that there's a bunch of things that they offer that are positive. And my wondering is, again, the time issue and, can they get it done?
Thank you, Mary. Laurel.
So obviously they have a ton of experience. Mentioned it several times. I really appreciated that I wasn't really too worried about how many people came back. Things happen. So, but I was, let's see, I have some notes written. I felt like their answers were very similar to last time, much like what Martina said. They were very well practiced. There's this book that we read at work, and they talk about being, the values of to pick when you're doing this kind of work is humble. I bet you know about this, Alicia, because I have to read this. Humble, hungry, and smart. And I definitely smart, but they didn't have that hunger that I want. And that they are, a hungry person is like intrinsically motivated to have, they're motivated, they're diligent, and they have a strong desire to go above and beyond. And I didn't see that. There's no way we would get in trouble by using them, but I'm always, what amazing person can we get by going outside of the box that we usually worked inside of. I would say the answer that bothered me the most, and I only heard part of it because my computer decided to crash, was about the equity lens. And it was really, it was so easy to just look at our equity lens and go, oh, we know what you want now. Meaning they don't have their own work about equity. And that is the difference absolutely with performative equity, which was what that was, and foundational equity, which is what we heard from Alma. They wove it into many of their answers with Alma. Because we talk about the time, we need somebody who can pivot. Smaller can pivot better. They were repeating a lot of the same answers to the questions. I was really concerned whenever we asked them to be a little bit humble or vulnerable to tell us things that they learned, we didn't get to hear, but they spun it, much like I would do in an interview, into something positive. And I was like, I really wanted to hear a little bit of that vulnerability so I could know that they understood it and what they would do with it if something did happen. I think they both really know how to use social media, surveys, and that kind of stuff to connect. They mentioned a lot about how huge the job was. They said that person, it will be a full-time job. And I believe, and maybe there's more questions we can ask, and know we're deciding tomorrow. But what I heard from Alma was that they were doing a lot of this work. They were not leaving it all on us to do. That when the way they were answering the questions was that, yeah, no, they said over and over, we will look for this. We will find, we will put it all together and get it to you. As opposed to what I heard from McPherson is, you guys are going to be doing all that work. We'll get it to you, the raw data. Good luck. So that's the way I took it in. I'm more excited with Alma than McPherson. I, of course, will work with both. I do think it's important as a board that we understand how to flex and bend. And I don't quite see this happening yet. And I wish it would happen more.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, now I think I didn't overlook anyone. Everyone had a chance to share their thoughts. Okay, then I'm going to say we have some individual pondering to do tonight, and tomorrow we will be having this discussion at our board meeting and taking a vote to choose a search firm. So with that, I'm going to, seeing no other comments or questions, I'm going to close this work session, and we'll see you tomorrow at 5:30.